Money and move. You finally got your green card. Congratulations. Now, the goal is simple. Protect it. Because most green card problems don't start at the interview, they start after approval with three common mistakes: tax filing, long travel outside the U.S., and missed USCIS deadlines. In the next few minutes, I'll give you a clear checklist of what you can do, what you must do every year, and what to avoid so you stay safe and ready for citizenship. Curious, quick disclaimer before we begin. This video is for general educational information only. It is not legal advice, tax advice, or financial advice. Immigration and tax rules can change, and the right steps depend on your category, your history, and your documents. For personalized advice, consider speaking with a qualified immigration attorney and, when needed, a qualified tax professional. Pause. For official information, use uscis.gov, irs.gov, ssa.gov, and medicare.gov, plus your state's official websites. Now, let's start with the most important mindset shift. A green card is not just a benefit, it's a legal status you must maintain. The good news is that most people can keep their status safely by following a few straightforward rules and staying organized. The bad news is that many permanent residents accidentally create problems simply because no one clearly explained what changes after approval. So let's go step by step, starting with what opens up for you immediately once you become a lawful permanent resident. First, you now have a path to U.S. citizenship through naturalization. Many people assume they can apply right away, but there is a required period of permanent residence before you're eligible. In many cases, if you got your green card through marriage to a U.S. citizen, you may be eligible to apply after 3 years as a permanent resident, as long as you meet the other requirements for that category. Those requirements typically include living in a real marital relationship, meeting continuous residence rules, meeting physical presence requirements, and demonstrating good moral character. If you got your green card through most other categories, employment-based cases, many family-based categories, and other common routes, the standard timeline is often 5 years as a permanent resident before applying, assuming you meet all other requirements. Also, many applicants are allowed to apply a little early, but you still must meet the full eligibility requirements by the time USCIS makes a decision. The safest approach is to confirm your eligibility date using official USCIS resources or a qualified attorney, especially if you have any long trips, prior immigration issues, or anything unusual in your history. Second, you can petition certain family members. This is one of the most valuable benefits of a green card, but it's also an area where people get confused about timing. In general, lawful permanent residents can file immigrant petitions for a spouse and for unmarried children. Depending on the situation, that can include unmarried children under 21 and also unmarried adult children. However, unlike U.S. citizens, permanent residents generally do not sponsor family members as immediate relatives. Instead, your family members typically fall into preference categories, which means there are annual limits and waiting lines controlled by the visa bulletin. So here's the practical takeaway. Yes, you may be allowed to file, but approval timing depends on visa availability. That means you should file as early as you're eligible, keep your records clean, and check the visa bulletin so you understand the timeline realistically. This is especially important if a child's age is close to 21, because aging out can affect the category and the wait time. If you're in a time-sensitive situation, get professional guidance so you don't lose options due to delays or paperwork mistakes. Third, if your green card was employment-based, you usually have far more flexibility in your career. Once you're a lawful permanent resident, you're generally authorized to work in the United States without needing a separate work visa sponsor. That means in many cases you can change jobs, change employers, negotiate salary, switch industries, or pursue different opportunities without new immigration sponsorship just to remain lawfully employed. But you should still be careful about one specific scenario: leaving the sponsoring employer immediately after approval. There is a common myth that you must stay with the sponsoring employer for a specific number of years, such as 5 years. That's not a universal rule. The real concern is whether the green card process was based on a genuine job offer and a good faith intention to work in that role. If you leave right away and it looks like you never intended to work in the sponsored position, that can raise questions later. especially during the naturalization process when USCIS reviews your immigration history. This does not mean you can't ever change jobs soon after getting a green card. It means you should think strategically, document legitimate reasons for the change, and consider getting advice if the timing is sensitive. Fourth, you can generally start and run a business. Many new green card holders don't realize how much freedom they now have to build income in the U.S. In many cases, a lawful permanent resident can form an LLC or corporation, operate as a sole proprietor, do independent contractor work, own multiple businesses, hire employees, and invest in business opportunities, while following standard business, licensing, and tax requirements. Your green card usually gives you broad work authorization, which includes self-employment. If you want to start a business, the smart approach is to set it up properly from day one. Register the business correctly, track income and expenses, and handle taxes correctly so your immigration record and tax record stay clean. Now let's talk about the never do this category, because a few specific mistakes can create extremely serious consequences for permanent residents. The first major one is voting. A lawful permanent resident is not a U.S. citizen. That means you cannot vote in federal elections, state elections, or local elections. Even if you have lived in the U.S. for years, even if you pay taxes, even if you own property, and even if you feel fully integrated in your community, voting is reserved for U.S. citizens. Registering to vote or casting a ballot as a non-citizen can trigger serious immigration problems. Sometimes people register by mistake because of confusing forms, DMV interactions, or bad advice. The safest rule is simple. Do not register and do not vote until you naturalize. The second major one is falsely claiming U.S. citizenship. Never check a box that says U.S. citizen on any form unless you are a U.S. citizen. This can show up in employment paperwork, voter registration forms, benefits applications, school forms, or other government-related documents. Even a small mistake can have long-term consequences. If a form asks about citizenship or immigration status and you are unsure how to answer, stop and verify before submitting. The third issue is jury duty. Jury duty is generally reserved for U.S. citizens, but sometimes permanent residents receive a jury summons due to database errors. If you receive a summons, do not ignore it. Respond according to the instructions and explain that you are a lawful permanent resident and not eligible. Ignoring official notices can create unnecessary complications. Handling it correctly keeps the record clean. Now we move into the most important part: what you must do to maintain your green card status and avoid problems later. Let's start with taxes, because this is one of the biggest areas where green card holders accidentally create issues. As a lawful permanent resident, you are generally treated as a U.S. tax resident for federal tax purposes. That often means you must file a federal income tax return if you meet the filing thresholds, and you may be required to report worldwide income, not just income earned inside the U.S. This doesn't automatically mean you will pay double taxes on foreign income. In some situations, foreign tax credits, treaty rules, or other provisions can reduce double taxation, but you still need to handle the reporting correctly. Many immigration problems start when someone doesn't file, files incorrectly, claims non-resident status when they shouldn't, or builds up serious unpaid tax debt. Tax compliance can become especially important if you later apply for U.S. citizenship, because USCIS may review your tax filing history as part of the naturalization process. If you have income from outside the U.S., foreign bank accounts, foreign property, overseas business interests, or complex investment income, don't guess. International reporting can be complicated. The safest move is to work with a qualified tax professional who understands international issues so you don't accidentally miss a requirement. Next, address updates. Every time you move, you generally must update your address with USCIS, often within 10 days, using Form AR11, usually available online. A very common mistake is assuming that changing your address with the post office updates USCIS. It does not. You must update USCIS directly. This matters because USCIS sends important notices by mail: biometrics appointments, evidence requests, interview notices, and other official communications. If your address is not updated, you might miss a deadline and create serious complications without realizing it. Also, if you have special confidentiality protections, such as certain VOLWA-related situations, address updates may require specific handling to protect your privacy. If you are in a protected category, don't treat AR11 like routine paperwork. Verify the correct method using official guidance or professional help. Now, conditional green cards. This is a major do not miss deadline. Some people receive a 2-year conditional green card, often based on a marriage that was less than 2 years old at the time of approval. A conditional card expires after 2 years. To keep permanent resident status, you typically must file to remove conditions, often Form I-751, during the 90-day window before the card expires, unless a waiver category applies. If you file on time, your status generally continues while the case is pending, and you receive documentation extending your status. Where people get into trouble is missing the filing window or assuming I can file anytime. Timing matters. If you are filing jointly with a spouse and you miss the window, USCIS can consider your status terminated and begin processes that are difficult to fix. If your marriage ended, your spouse died, or you experienced abuse or other serious issues, you may qualify for a waiver filing. Waiver cases can have different requirements and evidence. If you're in that situation, plan early. Don't wait until the last minute to gather documents. Now, 10-year green card renewal. If you have a standard 10-year green card, you renew the card using Form I-90. Even though your lawful permanent resident status does not automatically disappear simply because the physical card expires, you are still expected to maintain valid proof of status. An expired green card can make life difficult. International travel can become stressful, driver's license renewals can be blocked, employment verification can become harder, and routine tasks become complicated. So set reminders well before your expiration date and file for renewal on time. Next, selective service. Many male permanent residents between ages 18 and 25 are required to register for selective service. If this applies to you, register promptly. Failing to register can create problems later, including during the naturalization process. If you are unsure whether the requirement applies to you, verify it using official resources. Now, we need to talk about travel, because travel is one of the fastest ways people accidentally create an abandonment problem. As a permanent resident, you can travel outside the U.S. Short trips are generally fine, but longer trips can trigger questions. Trips of 6 months or more can raise issues about whether you maintained continuous residence, especially when you later apply for citizenship. Trips of 1 year or more without a reentry permit can be especially risky and may lead to serious problems when you return, because the government may treat it as abandonment of residence. The key concept is simple. Permanent residence means your primary home is in the United States. If your travel patterns suggest you live somewhere else, you may be questioned at the airport. If the problem is serious, you can be placed into proceedings where you have to defend your status. If you know in advance that you will need to spend an extended time outside the U.S., for family obligations, work assignments, medical reasons, or emergencies, the smartest move is to plan ahead and get guidance before leaving. In many cases, a re-entry permit may be recommended for longer absences, but your strategy depends on your circumstances. The worst time to solve this problem is after you've already been outside the country for too long. Travel ties directly into another key factor. Maintaining strong ties to the U.S. officers don't only look at the number of days you were away, they also look at whether your life is genuinely based here. This can include having a real home in the U.S., keeping U.S. bank accounts active, maintaining employment or a business connection, filing taxes properly, maintaining a driver's license, and generally showing that the U.S. is your primary base. The stronger your ties, the easier it usually is to show you did not intend to abandon residence. The weaker your ties, the more risk you create. Now let's talk about a question many new green card holders ask once the excitement settles. Should you stay a permanent resident, or should you become a U.S. citizen as soon as you can? For many people, citizenship is the best long-term stability. It can provide stronger protection from certain immigration consequences, the right to vote, and the ability to sponsor more relatives, and often with faster categories. Citizenship can also reduce some travel anxiety because you're not trying to prove permanent residence in the same way, but the decision depends on your life. Some people delay citizenship because of travel patterns, dual citizenship considerations, personal preference, or timing issues. The key is to make the decision based on facts, not rumors. If you are thinking about citizenship, start by checking your eligibility date, reviewing your travel history, verifying your tax compliance, and ensuring your address history is clean and consistent. Now I want to give you a practical do this now checklist. Not to overwhelm you, just to keep you safe. If you've just gotten your green card, do these steps this week. Make a secure folder, digital and/or paper, for your immigration documents. Keep copies of your green card, front and back, approval notices, and key filings. Set calendar reminders for any deadlines. Green card expiration, conditional removal window if applicable, and future citizenship eligibility date. Verify your USCIS address is current and commit to updating it every time you move. Review your travel plans for the next 12 months and avoid long absences without planning. Confirm you understand the no voting rule and never claim citizenship on any form. If selective service applies, register, and make sure you're set up for tax compliance, either through a qualified preparer or through reliable filing systems, especially if you have foreign income or accounts. Now, a quick word about why these basics matter so much. Many permanent residents believe they can fix it later if something goes wrong, but immigration is not always forgiving about timing or certain types of mistakes. A missed form can create a chain reaction. A long trip can create a difficult airport encounter. A tax problem can turn into a citizenship delay. And voting or claiming citizenship can become a serious issue. The point isn't to scare you, it's to help you avoid problems that are usually preventable. Let's also talk about something practical, when you should consider getting professional help. You don't need an attorney for every small question, but you should strongly consider guidance if any of the following are true. You have a conditional green card and your relationship situation is complicated. You have long travel plans outside the U.S. You have prior immigration issues or prior arrests. You have tax complications or foreign income assets. You received confusing notices from USCIS. Or you are preparing for naturalization and want to make sure you meet the requirements cleanly. If you keep your taxes clean, keep your address updated, manage your travel wisely, and handle renewals on time, you will avoid most of the major problems that cause people stress. Now let's wrap this up with a simple summary you can remember. As a green card holder, you gain powerful rights. You can live and work in the U.S. permanently, often change jobs freely, potentially start a business, and begin building a path toward citizenship. You may be able to sponsor certain family members, though timing depends on visa availability. But you also take on responsibilities. File taxes correctly as a resident when required, report income properly, keep USCIS updated with your current address, renew your card on time, remove conditions if you have a conditional green card, register for selective service if required, and protect your residence by avoiding long absences or weak ties to the U.S. And you must avoid major mistakes like voting or claiming U.S. citizenship. If you want more videos like this from U.S. Money and Move, you can request topics in the comments. Common follow-ups include green card versus citizenship, how to sponsor a spouse or child, and what the visa bulletin really means, travel rules and re-entry permits, conditional green card removal strategies, and tax basics for permanent residents. Thanks for watching. Again, this video is general education only, not legal or tax advice. Congratulations on your green card, and take the next step. Protect the status you worked so hard to earn.